Okay. Again, yeah, thanks for joining us today. We're here to do the public launch of the new IEA policy brief, the value of demand flexibility. And it is a pretty packed schedule today, so I won't spend too long at the introduction. But first, for those joining us for the first time, my name is Brendan Reidenbach. I'm an analyst from the IEA, from the Office of Energy Efficiency and Inclusive Transitions. And I lead up the digitalization workstream within the agency here in the Energy Efficiency Office, in particular leading up the 3DEN initiative, and that's the Digital Demand Driven Electricity Networks initiative. And this is an interagency initiative between the International Energy Agency, United Nations Environment Programme, and also the Italian Ministry of Environment and Energy Security. And this is now entering the sixth year. We're in phase 2 of the 3DEN initiative. The project itself focuses on looking at power system modernization, how digitalization fits into that, how it works with smart grid solutions, looking at integrating grid edge technologies, but also has a major focus on demand side management and demand side resource integration. And this policy brief that we're going to discuss today, and the topic more broadly, takes a view at starting the discussion to move further, to move that policy narrative on demand side flexibility and how that can become a larger tool for policymakers to help contribute towards balancing power systems for increased security, increased sustainability, efficiency, but also contribute to energy affordability. And as I said, this policy brief is available on the IEA website. You can go there by looking through the 3DEN landing page, and there's a QR code here, or just looking on the IEA website and searching for 3DEN, and you'll find a link to the landing page there with lots of really good resources for policymakers and also regulators, system operators as well. There's a lot more information in there. So a quick overview of the agenda then. We're going to start with a generous introduction from the Director General, Alessandro Guerri, from the Italian Ministry of Environment and Energy Security, who'll discuss how we start to look to navigate uncertainty in power systems in this time of change and flux, and look at the role of international collaboration. We'll then go through to Dr. Brian Motherway, the head of the Office of Energy Efficiency and Inclusive Transitions here at the International Energy Agency. We'll look at the role of demand flexibility and how that fits into power systems, taking an efficiency first approach by looking at how demand flexibility can contribute to some of those gains that we need, particularly as we move in this age of electricity. We'll then move from hearing about the benefits of demand flexibility to look at what are the drivers that are looking for increased flexibility in power systems in the here and now. And we'll have contributions from the lead author of the policy brief, that is Nam-Hyuk Kim, energy analyst here at the International Energy Agency. And then to move to a more practical, grounded conversation, we're going to hear from industry experts and specialist research organizations who are delving deep into demand flexibility, but also looking to see how this can be used in a more practical setting to give us really good data that we can use to start moving forward to make demand flexibility more powerful, or to have a greater contribution to power systems in the coming years and decades. And we'll have voices from the Center of Net Zero, from Enel in Colombia, and also from Schneider Electric Sustainability Resource Institute. And then finally, we'll come to our 3DEN partners from the United Nations Environment Programme, who will give us some updates on some real-world implementation projects that are happening right now, and some more projects which are going to be happening in the next 2 years, which are really pushing the application of digitalization in power systems in real-world settings. And finally, then it will come to me to wrap up. So with that, I will now pass the floor to Director General Alessandro Guerri from the Italian Ministry of Environment and Energy Security. So with that, please, Director General, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Brendan, for your kind introduction, and also for your words and your brief introduction of today's panel. Colleagues, partners, and friends, thank you to the IEA for organizing this webinar and for the new report named The Value of Demand Flexibility Benefits Beyond Balancing, elaborated in the framework of our joint initiative, TRIDEN. As we know, the current energy situation is very complex and is changing really fast. The IEA World Energy Outlook 2025 reports that energy is again at the center of the global debate, not only because of climate issues, but also because of security, competitiveness, and the stability of our economies. And on this topic, in particular, as European countries, we are particularly concerned about. Geopolitical tensions have shown how vulnerable energy supply chains can be. Ukraine is an example, and today we face new risks, not only linked to oil and gas, but also to critical minerals, concentration of manufacturing capacity, and technology dependence. The global energy demand continues to grow, driven by development in emerging economies and by new needs, such as mobility, heating and cooling, and digital service in particular. Data centers and artificial intelligence are expanding very fast. But also, there are also good news, because you know the path in tripling renewables is growing quickly, but oil, gas, and coal still remain significant, even in countries fully committing in greening their economy. Inside this complexity, one direction is clear. We are entering in what many call the age of electricity. We are very focused as Italy on the Africa context, where for sure we will see a rising of electricity demand in the coming decades. Electricity demand is growing much faster than total energy demand. Electricity is already the backbone of modern economies, and it will become even more central, pushed by advanced manufacturing, data centers, and electrification of it. Today, electricity represents just over 1/5 of global final energy use, around 21%. In the next decade, its share is expected to increase significantly, reaching around 40 to 50% of global final energy use by 2035, depending on the scenario we think about. In the age of electricity, as we have called it, the question is not only how much clean power we can build, that always is more in the spotlight, but also can the system stay reliable and affordable while demand increases and renewable expand. This is where demand flexibility becomes a strategic solution. Flexibility is often discussed as a tool for balancing the grid, but this report shows something stronger. Flexibility brings benefits beyond balance. It can improve efficiency, strengthen security, reduce system and consumer costs, and cut emissions. But to scale flexibility, we need the right condition: clear signals, fair rules, and strong competition. This is exactly what international cooperation matters, and this is where TRIDEN comes in and was designed for. TRIDEN is about more than a technology platform. It is about partnership and trust. It is bound within the multilateral system, as you know, thanks to the partner UNEP-EA, IEA, sorry. And it is about how we accelerate a clean and just transition and how digital innovation can make it. Digitalization is changing the way we produce, distribute, and consume energy. The IEA has highlighted that smart technology could save up to $1.8 trillion in grid investments by 2050. At the same time, the climate challenge remains very serious, so we need to deep emission cuts quickly and in difficult geopolitical contexts, as mentioned before. Here is the good news. If deployed at scale, digital solution could cut global energy-related emission by up to 10% by 2030. That is equivalent to taking every car in the European Union off the road. And I think would be a remarkable result. For Italy, Trident has also become, over the last 3 years, one of the key international cooperation initiatives of the Ministry on digitalizing energy system with a clear goal, improving energy security and making energy use more efficient. Trident has been recognized in major international forums, including G7 and G20, and it's an operational platform to showcase the strength of the Italian system together with our international partners. Across the first 2 phases, we have selected a total of 18 pilot projects in Latin America and Africa, with the involvement of 24 Italian entities, including companies, universities, and research centers, confirming the strong international demand for Italian skills and technologies. Phase 1 of the Trident showed what is possible when innovation meets collaboration. Across 4 pilots in Brazil, Colombia, India, and Morocco, the program reached about 340,000 people, adding 26 megawatts of clean power, mobilizing $9.3 million, and avoided more than 5,000 tons of CO2. Now the objective is moving from project designing and awardings to scale. With Italian support, Phase 2 expands Trident to 7 African countries: Ethiopia, Kenya, Morocco, Nigeria, South Africa, Tanzania, and Tunisia, while keeping Brazil as a key partner. Phase 2 also expands into agri-food system to strengthen both urban networks and rural productivity, improving efficiency and security. And Phase 2 is already concrete. We are moving forward with 14 new projects representing more than $28 million of investment. This project will support solutions like smart irrigation, advanced grid management, smart building, digital industrial processes. Let me close with 3 clear messages. Always, you can imagine, we are seeking for allies. First, in the age of electricity, flexibility is not only optional. It is part of energy security and economic competitiveness. If we want stable prices and reliable power, we must make flexibility a normal part of how we run and plan our power system. Second, we should make it easy to invest and to participate. That means clear frameworks, fair access, and rules. Third, the transition must be visible and fair. People and businesses need to feel the benefits in a simple way: better services, lower costs, and new opportunity, not extra complexity. This is what practical cooperation looks like the IEA, UNEP, and Italy working together through Trident to turn innovation into real results and share goals into real action. The message is clear: digitalization is not the future of energy, it's already here. Now we need to scale up, and to scale up what works, what isolated as efficient and effective, in a faster and with stronger partnership. Italy remains fully committed to this effort as a trusted partner, a promoter of innovation, and a bridge between countries and institutions. Please, we are also today here to hear you and to try to understand how to expand the network of friends, allies, and hopefully contributors. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Director General, for those really insightful words looking at the power of international collaboration and how this stretches across many nations, across many continents, and the role for digitalization for developing power systems, not just in the advanced economies, but also for the emerging markets and developing economies. And now I will pass the floor to Dr. Brian Motherway, the Head of Office of Energy Efficiency and Inclusive Transitions here at the International Energy Agency. And I think we'll hear much more of how demand flexibility moves from this pool of our tool of power system modernization in more broad settings to actually how this integrates into power systems and how this integrates into whole power system efficiency. And so with this, Dr. Motherway, please, I pass the floor to you.
Thank you, Brendan, and thank you everybody for joining us today. It's a pleasure to be with you, and particularly thanks to our partners, the Government of Italy and United Nations Environment Programme, for the ongoing, very positive and warm collaboration we have. And Director General Guerri, dear Alessandro, thank you in particular to the Government of Italy, not just for its financial support of this important work, but for its strategic global leadership and for your leadership in driving these really important issues forward. We're very pleased to be able to work with you on an ongoing basis on these important issues. And let me also agree with you, Alessandro, that we really are seeing a shift in as we move into the age of electricity. We see really significant demand growth consistently across the world in electricity because we are electrifying loads like electric vehicles, heat pumps. We are seeing massive growth in industrial energy, electricity use. And of course, we're seeing new demand drivers such as data centers and rapid growth in air conditioners, among others. So we see this growth, but we also see the electricity system becoming more complex and more dynamic. We see higher shares of variable generation, new types of both supply and demand, and new degrees of complexity in terms of balancing that. So we're dealing with complexity, we're dealing with multiplication of the system into a much different type of electricity system than we saw in the past. And the growth we're going to see is not just growth of the same types of systems we've had for the last century, but something very different. And of course, this puts several imperatives to the fore. First of all, security and resilience. How do we make sure grids are robust and secure for the future? How do we make sure that electricity is fully secure in the way that the IEA focuses on all aspects of energy security? And how do we make sure we protect ourselves against crises related to extreme weather, cybersecurity, and many of the emerging threats for the electricity system of the future? It also raises a key imperative about energy affordability, because we're going to see massive degrees of investment in electricity systems of the future, whether it's in grids themselves, whether it's in grid control, in generation, in supply, in transmission, distribution, and consumption of electricity. And then how do we design that we minimize these investments, but also how do we make sure that the payment for these investments is fair and affordable and robust and sustainable into the future? So for us, this points to the importance of two things being central in future electricity systems. First, of course, is energy efficiency. It's the first fuel in all parts of the energy system. And of course, it goes without saying that the more efficiently we use energy system, the less growth we need to see in our energy systems as a whole, in terms of the investment we need in grids, the size of the grids of the future, the degree of investment we need in generation and transmission. All can be optimized by making sure that all of this electricity is being used as efficiently as possible. And that's something that we're working with all governments around the world on for a very long time now. Secondly, of course, though, is flexibility, which is what we're here to talk about today. For me, the concepts of energy efficiency and demand-side flexibility are not separate topics. They are the future of the demand-side conversation, particularly for electricity systems, where we think about grid interactivity, efficiency, demand-side flexibility, all as part of the same story. And that's why the report we're launching today is a really important step to analyze just what demand-side flexibility can do for electricity systems around the world. And you'll be hearing more about this, but there are some striking findings in the report that Brendan and Namyuk and his colleagues produced in terms of the importance of how better utilization utilization of existing assets can greatly improve the efficiency of the whole electricity system by up to 30% at times, which is a major contribution to energy efficiency and emissions reduction in itself. Secondly, it can provide new capacity at much lower cost than many supply-side interventions, often up to 3 times less than new capacity interventions on the supply side, again, making systems more sustainable and much more affordable. And of course, it can improve system reliability by reducing peak stress and helping grids cope with the pressures that they are under today and will be in the future. And of course, decarbonisation, which again, Alessandra has stressed the importance of clean energy transitions that are affordable, robust, fair, and of course, as optimised as possible. And again, demand side flexibility, as you'll read when you look at our new report, can really make a major contribution in reducing emissions from grids by optimising the use of the best resources and optimising the balance between supply and demand at all times. And again, I want to stress that we need to see efficiency and flexibility as part of the same topic. It's no longer sufficient to talk about in one room how much electricity a certain appliance uses over the course of a year, and in a different room talk about the contribution of that appliance to system flexibility and part of being a dynamic, controllable, interactive grid. We need to bring these concepts together and understand where the real value lies, and that's what today's conversation is about. So we're very pleased to have worked with so many of you on this report and to have so many of you here today. I know we're going to learn a lot from all of you. I particularly, again, want to thank the Director General and all the team in Rome. We're delighted to be able to continue to work with you, as well as the team in UNEP, who are a very collaborative partner and showing the practical side through the pilot projects of what exactly is happening on the ground. We're at a moment where we need to see the evidence, we need to see the data, we need to see the real experience. And so the 3DEN pilot projects are really essential in that regard, and we're delighted to be part of that process. Looking forward to hearing from all of you today, and thank you for joining us. Thank you, Brendan.
Thank you very much, Dr. Motherway, for that intervention and hearing about the multiple benefits of efficiency and how that fits into the picture of demand flexibility, those contributions beyond just system balancing. And now I will pass the floor to Nam-Hyuk Kim, a colleague here at the Office of Energy Efficiency at the IEA, who was the lead author who helped deliver the framework behind this policy brief. And we'll hear about what are the drivers on the ground that are actually raising the conversation on demand side flexibility. So with that, please, Nam-Hyuk, the floor is yours. We just can't hear you at the moment, Nam-Hyuk. Okay, can we try that again? Is that working, Nam-Hyuk?
Sorry about this.
Yes, we have got you. We've got your sound. Excellent.
Yeah, thank you, Brendan, and thank you, Director General Guerri, for having me and for this opportunity. So let me suggest 3 key trends driving the need for flexibility. So the first one is the electricity demand. So the demand is rising, obviously, at a fast pace, but we need to also pay attention to demand profiles, which are changing fast as well. So peak demand is rising, and it actually is outpacing the average demand increases in many regions. And peak hours are also shifting into the evening, where contributions of renewable resources declines. So in this graph shows 2 country examples, Korea and the Netherlands. And you can see here that both countries have experienced peak demand increases by 15% and 20% respectively for the past 10 years, reflecting some different country contexts. For example, higher penetration of air conditioning and growing space cooling needs for Korea, and higher adoption of heat pumps for the Netherlands. So what this implies? It implies that the grid and the system is under higher pressure, and the system operation is becoming more unpredictable and complex. So systems have to address rising demand as well as face quick ramps and tighter operating margins. So in order to set demand and supply in balance, systems have to either ramp up supply quickly or reduce demand quickly instead. So this is the first part, and the next part is the electricity market signals showing volatility. So electricity supply conditions are changing rapidly as the share of wind and solar increases. So this is reflected in larger wholesale price swings and a growing frequency of negative prices, which are normally happening late at night or midday, when, relatively speaking, demand is low or renewable output is high. So you can see here in this graph, many regions having recently experiencing a rising incidence of negative prices. In South Australia, for example, the 2024 fraction was reaching 25%. So what does this signal? It signals that supply is available and abundant, but demand is not responding. This limited responsiveness increases balancing cost and also raises investor concerns and uncertainty. Let me get to the last point. So the last one is the grid as a bottleneck. So grid upgrades and new connections take years, and in some cases longer than that. It also requires a huge amount of money to invest. So as a result, grid constraints are happening right now, and they are creating wider impacts and system challenges. The first one, grid congestion, is arising. So you can see here $12 billion in the European Union and in the United States in 2024, so which is a huge number. Renewables are increasingly curtailed. The curtailment exceeded 10 terawatt-hour in 2024 in the European Union alone, so which is a big missed opportunity. It was enough to power 3 million homes for the year. And thirdly, obviously, we can see many delays in new or upgrade grid connections to thousands of businesses and households. So it's becoming more visible. So taken all together, these trends strengthen the need and case for flexibility. So now demand is becoming harder to manage, market volatility is increasing, and grid bottlenecks are tightening. Leveraging demand flexibility, however, can help reduce system stress and deliver multiple benefits to the system. So I think it's now the time that our focus is moving on from the economy of scale to economy of flexibility and the demand side potential to scale that flexibility. That's what I got today. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Nam Duc, for those insights. And all of those statistics and many more really interesting pieces of analysis are obviously available in this policy brief, the value of demand flexibility. And that's available on the IEA website. Again, follow the QR code here or look for this report on the IEA landing page. So now we're going to hear about more practical applications and hear about some additional pieces of research that other colleagues are working on this out in the field. And we're excited today to be joined by some great colleagues. Amber Woodward, the Head of International Public Affairs from the Centre of Net Zero. That is a research institute as part of the wider Octopus Group. We've got Juliana Andrea Morena Daza, who's the Head of Network Business Opportunities Development from Enel in Colombia, and was responsible for implementing one of the pilot projects as part of the 3DEN initiative, which is featured in our policy brief. And also we'll hear from Vincent Manier, the Vice President of Energy Transition Research at Schneider Electric Sustainability Research Institute. And we will hear about the technology perspective of what's needed in here. So let me just stop sharing my slides just for one moment, and then we'll move this forward. So I think what we're trying to hear now, so what we could do is, so for Vincent, Amber, and Juliana, if you could unmute your mics, that would be great. Excellent, we can hear you loud and clear, Juliana. So yeah, so what we'd like to do is try and hear voices of the practical application of what's happening out there, how these projects are being implemented, what is happening in the world of technology, to hear about how this fits into national planning, regulations, frameworks, which we heard earlier on from Dr. Gueri, those needs for regulations and those frameworks, how they can be developed. So what we'd like to hear as well, like the voice is like, if you're speaking to the policymakers, what are the things you'd like to portray to them? How can they really benefit from locking demand flexibility into power system planning going forward? So I think we'll kick things off and we'll look at what's happening from some recent analysis in the UK, and we'll go to the colleagues from the Centre of Net Zero, who've done some really interesting analysis recently, looking at the acceleration of digital technologies, of that, the traditional S-curve adoption where things are slow and all of a sudden ramp very quickly. And we can see that historically, when this happens, not everyone is ready for this technology burst, or however you want to call this. So yeah, I think, Amber, when you kind of look at the recent work that you've been doing on electrification, on heat pumps and EVs, things like this, you've looked at these large growth, and I suppose in that context of rapid electricity demand, if you might be able to give us some idea of how demand flexibility could fit into this, with that view of kind of the framework of the IEA of sustainability, affordability, and reliability, and how demand flexibility could support power systems. So please, Amber, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Brendan, and thank you to the IEA for having me here today. As Brendan's already given me a generous introduction, I'm Amber from Centre for Net Zero. We're a not-for-profit energy research institute that was founded by the Octopus Energy Group, based in the UK but working internationally. And we've done some recent research looking at, as Brendan describes, the exponential phase of electrification that's happening globally, but particularly, as IEA points out in their reports, in emerging economies. And as Brian Motherway and others have mentioned, EVs, heat pumps, rooftop solar and batteries and air conditioning as well in some parts of the world are scaling rapidly, moving from early adoption to that mass market stage of adoption. And this creates structural shifts for power systems. Electrification increases total demand, but where and when that electricity is used is just as important. And as outlined in the IEA's report and highlighted just now by Namyuk King, peak demand is rising faster than average demand globally. And so if that continues in an unmanaged way, that's what will drive network stress and higher system costs. But these electrified technologies can be flexible assets. Our research has found that EV charging can be shifted away from the peak. Ours and others' analysis shows that across the UK and in the US, more than 90% of charging can occur at off-peak times. And that equates to system benefits of around $145 to upwards of nearly $600 of system savings per EV per year. And with automation and digitalization, that is showing significant potential to scale. We've also looked at heating and cooling demand and how that can be optimized, with heat pumps being particularly valuable because they're often used on cold days when grid resilience is most important. And solar and batteries as well can generate energy domestically when it's clean and abundant, storing and then releasing that energy strategically at times that benefit the grid and benefit consumers. And our modelling at Centre for Net Zero shows that flexible heat and transport demand in the UK could deliver around £5 billion per year of system value by 2035. And that comes from increased efficiency, as Brian already mentioned. That's reduced peaks, avoided network reinforcement, improved renewable integration, and lower wholesale costs. And those savings then feed through to lower consumer bills, directly addressing affordability. But that value can only really be realised within the right supportive environment, and that's where kind of policymakers come in. And there's three things that I'd like to mention that policymakers globally can take on board to realise that value. The first is that households need access to technologies, but also tariffs and increasingly automation, and that the underlying price signals need to support electrification. The electricity to gas price ratio is often called the spark gap, needs to be around 2.5 to incentivize electrification and make it economical to transition to electrified technologies. And whilst we are reaching that, exponential phase, there's still a place for government subsidies, tax breaks, and regulation to support technology adoption and help it to continue to scale. Second is on system design, and that must assume flexible electrification, integrating empirical research, but also system modelling and data about how consumers are interacting with technologies and tariffs, and will ensure that we don't overbuild network capacity for that peak demand that can actually be managed through flexible technologies. And then finally, domestic flexibility must be able to compete on an equal footing with supply side flexibility and utility scale batteries. So we need to ensure that markets aren't penalising small scale assets, batteries in homes or EVs, which in aggregate can amount to gigawatts of flexible load, and we're seeing that in reality in the UK today. So electrification and flexibility can deliver efficiency and reliability and affordability when flexibility is embedded in policy making and regulation from the start. And that integration is going to be one of the central challenges of energy systems for this decade.
Fantastic. There's so much already in that first intervention, talk about exponential growth, but also already hearing about those key things that policy makers need to be looking at, about access, equity access, that it's not just those who can afford those technologies, but also looking at the tariffs and prices. So I think I've temporarily lost one of my speakers, Juliana, unless you're there in the background.
No, I'm here.
Oh, you're
here.
back. You're
It's
back.
okay.
Fantastic. Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. Just in time. So yeah, I think looking at what's happened on the ground in Colombia then. So although all of the details are kind of included within this policy brief, but for those who are listening in today who may not exactly know what this project entailed, maybe you could give us a bit more of a scene setting on this project in Colombia, about this Enel Flex project, and kind of what problems it was looking to overcome, how it was implemented, and why demand flexibility was looked to be explored in this test project. Please.
Okay,
Diana.
thanks. Okay, in our system in Colombia, we had a particular situation in a cluster of Bogota power system. We have registered a real condition of 2 of 3 faults per year in one of our high voltage line, causing the disconnection of average 322,000 clients, causing clients per event without the possibility of recovering the demand until the normalization of the event. This situation happened because one line went out and the other 2 high voltage lines that support the system were left without the capacity to assume the entire load. You can imagine the 10% of the demand went blackout totally. So seeing this challenge or this situation, we have to design an agile mechanism to solve a specific problem of our local distribution system. we had to manage an overload of high voltage line by reducing power of in the system and preventing a system outage or failure, a total failure in the northern zone of Bogota. These events occur 2 to 3 times in a year with an average duration of 6 hours. So the situation, how we handle it, by reducing a total load of the lines by 10% for the industrial customer in our system. That is 10% of the clients, industrial clients, were able to reduce this power, and we are able to balance the high voltage lines, So we look for implementation of flexibility services, enabling the voluntary disconnected demand mechanism. And we established a regulated flexibility scheme in the scope of the energy distribution system in our market. And we developed a platform that enables and supports interaction between the DSO and the customers. And this including the billing of flexibility service. In resume, colleagues, we developed the first flexibility market in Colombia. In the distribution system, we were able to reduce power in the industrial client to benefit residential clients. So this was an agile mechanism, because the normal infrastructure, I mean substation or new high voltage lines, is a long way to take. So we need to be fast, and our customer asked for that. That's where the solution came up, and Tree then helped us to develop it.
That's fantastic. I mean, you're really setting the scene here. It's like it really is the sharp edge of electricity security, how these projects, they're not just hypothetical. These are not just on the potential benefits of demand-side flexibility, but actually the potential to protect hundreds of thousands of people from losing power for up to 6 hours at a time, which is really, really impressive. And that's obviously just one project, but we can see how this can affect much more countries in different regions as well. So I think we're hearing about how this framework was set up to look at unlocking demand-side flexibility. But obviously you're talking about these connections, these frameworks where to communicate with the DSOs and the customers. So I think let's take a look at the customer side now, and I move to colleagues from Snyder Research, and look at how the digitalization aspect can fit into buildings who are integrating into the power system. Without customers, there is no power system. So looking at that customer perspective, the technology perspective, I suppose, Vincent, if you might be able to explain a bit more on what capabilities are critical for buildings to fit into this infrastructure, to offer their flexibility, to become, greater participants rather than just passive actors.
Yes, thank you, Brendan, and thank you, the IEA, for welcoming me. You said no customer, no flexibility, but I would say also no digital, no flexibility. In fact, so it's you cannot, if you do not control, you do not get anything. Just a word about our institute. We basically do technico-economic research to sustain a vision of the impact of the demand side on the energy systems, because we believe innovation and people behavior will shape the future of the energy system, so the grids and the needed supply. And we have been leading research along buildings and integration of electrical vehicles over the last 4 years, where we successively assessed different technologies like building management system, home energy management system, heat pumps, now smart charging, with a complement being what we call a microgrid, is a combination of PV and battery. And by aggregating all these, what we were able to show in broad studies, I say broad studies because in order to help the policymakers, we took more than 10 regions of the world with very diverse set of dynamic tariffs, with very diverse set of weather condition, of insulation conditions. And what we were able to show that by managing cleverly building management system, battery and EVs through the smart charging, we are able to, at the same time, and you were speaking about the multiple benefits of energy, of flexibility, we are able at the same time to first to have profitable project, which means that the discount rate, the discount rate, the profitability is obtained with respect with the target of the private investors. Second, we have the CO2 reduction, we have bill reduction, and in fact, with respect to the system operators, we are capable of managing the peak due to smart charging to charging if we do not pay attention, if we do not manage well. We took a hypothesis of charging today and in 2035, and in some of our office building, we have more than 200 cars, 200 chargers. And what we were able to do, even at this high level of penetration, we were able to show that we can manage the peak, and we can also provide back to the grid headroom such that you can improve the grid utilization rate. And in fact, we were able to show that in all the use case we managed, we were able to recover more than 50% of grid capacity usage, which is huge. And I'm talking here only about implicit flexibility, in fact. So just playing with the retail tariffs, which are not the one which are remunerating as much as, I mean, the biggest remuneration is more through explicit flexibility sometimes as a revenue. But if you just deploy smart tariffs today, you can already leverage a lot of value. Maybe a last point I wanted to bring is that yes, these demand-side flexibility, in fact, are very low-cost technology. If you take smart charging, it's just a controller. You just control.
Absolutely. Thanks, Vincent. Yeah, so from an interesting place to start as well, to say that without digitalization there is no flexibility, which very well feeds into the narrative that we've been developing here within the TRIDEN initiative, which is looking at that role of digitalization for supporting power system modernization, greater efficiency, but also to hear your input on that role of the tariffs and how they're already starting to contribute, but also that smart doesn't need to be expensive. It can be affordable, and it can still be very, very powerful within that perspective. And so I'm going to go back to Amber now. You alluded to this as well, and I think this follows on from what Vincent was just saying, that these things don't need to be expensive. They can be affordable. I'd like to hear from your analysis, or from the perspective of your analysis, Amber, is kind of what needs to be in place now to look at demand flexibility, to look at this equity access perspective, so that the use of digitalization, of automation, could accelerate electrification, but without creating new costs or without creating new equity issues, not simply creating new problems that we didn't have before. Please, Amber, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it's a really important question. But first, I just wanted to say that I think electrification and flexibility should lower system costs for everyone. That additional demand increases the electrons that are being consumed and spreads the network cost, which means that the cost per unit should fall. So I think that's the first thing to note. But it is true that equity risks are real in any transition. And without appropriate frameworks to support the transition, technologies can concentrate among higher income households unless policy intervenes early. But fortunately, as the IEA recognises in their report, in your report on from the latest one on TRIDEN, domestic demand flexibility can also improve greater equity. Lower income households have the most to gain as they spend a larger share of their income on energy. And so technologies and tariffs that can help lower bills have real benefits for low income households. And we've seen that play out in real world trials. I'll mention two. The first is a public EV charging trial that we ran with Octopus Electroverse. They're an EV charging app. And with 110,000 customers in the UK, we offered discounts on EV charging when electricity was cheap and abundant, which is, surprisingly not something that happens at scale in the UK. We did it as part of a pilot. And what we found was that demand increased by more than 100% in response to a 40% discount on EV charging. So really significant findings. And importantly for equity, the strongest responses came from areas that are skew lower income. So lower income consumers are more likely to respond to those discounts. And additionally, if those events were run regularly, EV charging costs could fall in line with petrol vehicles. And that's particularly important for low income households who may rely on off-street parking and public charging. And then the second thing I'll mention is our ongoing solar and battery trial, where with Octopus Energy, we're installing solar and batteries in low income households to sustainably reduce their bills. It's ongoing trial, so the results aren't yet published, but we're seeing really good findings, observing electricity demand reductions of around 80%, and annual bill savings in a similar range. So that's a really important finding about the benefits of smart tech for low-income households. And that aligns with the direction of the UK government in their recent Warm Homes Plan, where they centre electrification, solar and storage. And that's really critical because of the permanent reductions in bills. And so we were really pleased to see that last month.
No, that's really interesting. Oh, sorry, please.
I think there's more we can discuss. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amber. Sorry for cutting across you there. I thought you were finished. So, I mean, you can hear there's so much happening in the UK when we're looking at these different pilot projects. Some of those results are in and some of those are ongoing. But I might go back to Colombia now, where we can hear some of the results from a project which is finished now. But the lessons learned don't end there. Those lessons learned can be passed on to other people which are looking to develop similar projects and similar kind of environments, but also looking at what can be shared more broadly. So I suppose then, Juliana, if you look at this kind of from the outcomes for the customers and the communities, particularly as Amber was just talking about here, affordability, engagement, but also, as you mentioned earlier, from power system reliability, what were the findings that can be passed on to policymakers? And particularly if we think of policymakers who are looking to support countries to develop their own power systems through, international collaboration, sharing ideas, supporting with technical advice. What are those lessons learned?
Okay, from the pilot experience, the most valuable things for our client and communities was first, the expectation of compensation is greater than clients' operational costs. What this means, the industrial clients expected a compensation to temporarily lower their consumption were higher than their operational cost of lowering their productive activities. It's a compensation. They're expecting more money or more benefits from the flexibility services. In terms of participation, it was an open and voluntary mechanism. That means that all the industrial customers in the pilot area were able to participate and decided how much energy they were willing to reduce in the mechanism. It was voluntary. So most of them, they wanted to continue the program, they want to participate in flexibility services. It was a cultural thing, a skepticism about including economic benefits from flexibility service. They didn't believe it, that the flexibility could give this kind of benefits as remote control equipment installed in their facilities, send messages about the flexibility of activation in order to them to prepare the internal processes behind the fault, and the best of them, they were paid by the energy production. They didn't believe it, that it was so good. The other thing is that the residential, commercial, and all the demand on some industrial clients didn't see the fault, They didn't have to turn on their backup generation, both of them powered by fuel. They didn't see the falling because we prevented by these mechanisms. The lesson we can give to our policymaker are around the fact that the consumer are ready to participate in demand response mechanisms in distribution system, in the change of economic benefits in order to fulfill their operational costs and benefit the society. It was a win-to-win rate for all of them. And the final win rate was the project also laid the groundwork for identifying standard attributes in the definition of flexibility services in Colombia in terms of technology, market, and benefits, as well establishing a simple mechanism for verifying and measuring the flexibility services, I mean, how much power they decreased when it occurs, the measuring the time, and cost of its destination, among others. That's where the project gave to our regulators or our policymakers. It was very powerful in Colombia.
Absolutely, that is really, really impressive. And I particularly like the point you made at the start of why this was a success, is that customers wanted it, that they were ready to participate, but they had the option to participate. It wasn't mandatory. So it was that is, I think, something to take away when we're looking to deliver some more policy advice more broadly. Now, we're running just a few minutes behind. So, Vincent, I'm going to come to you and I'm going to give you the floor now.
Yes.
But if you can be as succinct as possible before we go to other colleagues from UNEP. But so
Yes.
I'm going to ask you then, okay, we've discussed the policymaker all along. We know the technology. We've heard that the customers want to participate, they're ready to participate. But what do policymakers need to hear about this?
Yes, I will be very brief, so I will get the time back very quickly. I think first you need to have visibility about what is the flexibility potential demand side speaking. So it's about, for example, what Europe is trying to push to develop, to deploy the smart readiness indicator, where you are able to understand, okay, how much power can I get during how much time? This is one example. The second is the deployment of enabling technologies. So it's about having connected assets behind the meter, whatever is the asset which contributes to the system. Second is to have an energy management system to manage all that. And I would say here the objective, I mean, the best value will be if you have an energy management system which aggregates all the flexible loads behind the meter, because it will allow the building owner, I'm talking non-residential, if it's a hotel, if it's an office, to be able to keep on making its process work while providing the maximum flexibility to the system. If it's pure asset driven, you will not get the same value. Then cloud connectivity, cybersecurity systems, and I would say there is a need to help the demand side to understand what is flexibility, how to do so. It could be about technology, a supporting platform with awareness, technologies, design, to help companies and people understand the flexibility potential. Last point, it's about the further optimization we can get from districts with self-balancing at district level. If you can share your solar PV to your neighbor, you can reduce grid congestion. So there is another layer of optimization which brings value to the grids and reduce grid congestions. And I will stop here.
Well, thank you very much, Vincent, for that insight as well. Saying it's not just about the asset; it's about how it fits into the system, the broader system, and making everything much more integrated, visible, but also having the ability to have that controllability over all of these different technologies. So I'm going to keep things moving on, and we're just a few minutes behind, but I'm hoping people don't mind staying on for an extra minute or two to hear from our colleagues in UNEP. And so I'll pass the floor over to my colleague, Miriam Tuami Kadiri, who's the head of finance unit from UNEP, from the climate, the head of the finance unit from the climate change division at United Nations Environment Programme. So please, Miriam, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. I was not able to reactivate the microphone.
Perfect.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for having me. So indeed, my name is Miriam Tuami, and I'm the head of the finance unit in UNEP. Thank you very much. So, dear colleagues, first, I really would like to extend UNEP's sincere appreciation for the continued support of the Italian Ministry of Environment and Energy Security. Thank you very much to General Director Mr. Guerri and his colleagues, Mrs. Anna Lydia Pensini and Alessandra Fidanza. We are very grateful for the trust and the partnership. I would also like to warmly thank the close partnership between UNEP and IEA. It is important to work together to ensure the success of the next 3 phases. So as we conclude, I would like to briefly reflect on the trajectory of the 3DEN initiative and what the next phases are designed to deliver. So phase 1 for 3DEN was deliberately focused on implementation. Between 2022 and 2024, 4 pilot projects that were mentioned in India, Colombia, Brazil, and Morocco, each one of them was designed to test under real operating conditions how digital tools can improve the way energy demand is managed across grids, industry, and end users. So in Colombia, for example, as we just heard, demand-side flexibility was tested at scale for the first time, engaging a large customer base and generating concrete operational insights for utilities and system actors. In India, the pilot demonstrated how digital twins and real-time monitoring can strengthen distribution grid operations and reliability. In Brazil, digitally enabled social housing projects showed how downstream tools can support more active energy management by households. And finally, in Morocco, advanced monitoring systems in industrial facilities delivered measurable efficiency gains and reduced energy consumption. So across these 4 pilots, the value of phase 1 was not only in the individual results, but in the lessons that they generated. They showed that demand flexibility can deliver system and user benefits, but only when solutions are embedded in existing operational practices, supported by data, and aligned with how utilities and consumers actually behave. So these lessons directly informed the design of phase 2. So phase 2, as it was earlier mentioned by General Director Mr. Guerri, represents a clear expansion of the initiative. 14 projects have been selected and are moving into implementation across several countries in Africa as well as Brazil. The portfolio focuses on 2 priority areas where digitalization and flexible demand can have immediate impact: agro-food systems and urban energy systems. In agro-food systems, projects will test how digital monitoring, data platforms, and clean energy solutions can reduce losses, improve productivity, and increase resilience for farmers and processors. In urban contexts, pilots will focus on buildings, municipal systems, and local grids, examining how digital-enabled demand can support reliability, manage peak loads, and improve service delivery. Importantly, phase 2 is structured to generate evidence. Each project is being implemented with a clear learning agenda so that results can be compared, documented, and shared in a 3DEN knowledge management platform. Closely with IEA, we would like to develop the 3DEN knowledge management platform. The objective of it is to move beyond isolated demonstrations and build a body of experience that can inform future project design and investment decisions. As 3DEN continues, the initiative will grow its project portfolio and its reach, using practical experience and from the ground to guide what comes next. So as the initiative is growing, we need to ensure its financing. This is where potentially phase 3 will be designed to ensure to provide financing for the potential pipeline. So to build on the success of phase 1 and phase 2 and the scale up of the 3DEN initiative, we would like to envision the development of a 3DEN finance facility to transition from grant-only funding to a blended finance model. The facility would support a pipeline of eligible digital energy projects by de-risking early-stage investment, crowding in private capital, and institutionalizing lessons learned from prior phases of the initiative. The facility would be focused on offering support to project developers and consortiums with a particular focus on projects being carried out in Africa. So before closing, I would like to acknowledge the close partnership between UNEP and IEA and the Italian Ministry of Environment and Energy Security, and their continued engagement has been essential in shaping 3DEN as a practical initiative focused on how digitalization can make energy demand more flexible and efficient in practice. And thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Miriam, and thank you very much for really grounding us into this, the here and the now of where 3DEN could be going in the coming years. So I think it's time to do a wrap up. We're a few minutes over, but I hope that's okay for a few minutes between friends. So when we look at today's discussion, it was incredibly wide ranging, but I really think it brought together a contextualization of demand flexibility from the start of looking at how this fits in from this energy first perspective, from hearing of Director General Guerri of how this is fitting into the system in an active way, of the role of international collaboration. And then we've heard from colleague Namyuk looking at the drivers behind demand flexibility, the need for more flexibility in what's happening from demand rising and volatility in the markets that's contributing to affordability issues. But we've also heard from the pilot projects of the people-centered outcomes of how this is contributing to people's lives today, how demand flexibility is improving power system reliability for hundreds of thousands of people already, and has the potential to expand more towards millions of people to increase the reliability. But without this, the policies behind this, the frameworks, the tariffs, the regulatory environment, it becomes more difficult to realize those benefits. We've heard from Colombia, from the results of the pilot projects, those lessons learned, how that's contributing to people already, but how it could potentially have a greater benefit when we can share those lessons learned. And this is why the 3DEN initiative is a very important vehicle for exchanging of ideas, peer-to-peer knowledge exchange, and we'll be delivering a further kind of information through different vehicles, more policy briefs coming up in the coming months and year so far. But we've also heard from the technology perspective from colleagues in the UK and from Schneider, looking at how the technology is integrating, how there's a need for this to become much more intelligent, to contribute in a greater way for increased affordability, controllability, and better integration across power systems. So I think all that's left for me to do now is, again, to thank our speakers from the Center for Net Zero, from Enel Colombia, from Schneider, from our partners in UNEP, from the Triden Initiative, for their support over the recent years and going forward, and finally to the generous support from the Italian Ministry of Environment and Energy Security, who have been supporting the Triden Initiative since 2020 so far, and we thank them again for their contributions and supporting the IEA to develop its research and analysis to support it as it is the reliable source of data on energy security, affordability, and reliability and sustainability going forward. So with that, I'll draw the session to a close, and I'll thank you all for joining us today in Paris, but also from Colombia, from Rome, and from the UK and elsewhere around the world. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.